Welcome back to the podcast. I am super excited to share the conversation I had with Fiona Feeley, who is an accredited psychotherapist and shamanic practitioner based in Maynooth. Inspired by her own mental health journey, Fiona takes a trauma-informed, integrative approach that blends psychotherapy with Eastern philosophy. We had such a fantastic chat and she was so helpful. Her work helps clients reconnect with all parts of themselves, including the parts they often suppress, to build self-awareness, compassion and a greater sense of purpose. I hope you enjoy it. Let me know your thoughts on this. Let's go. Fiona, it's great to have you on the podcast. I know my listeners are going to get so much out of this chat. Can I read you something back that you wrote on your Instagram that I just loved?
Okay, definitely.
Using parts, work, attachment theory, nervous system, regulatory skills, Eastern spirituality practices and shamanism, my life has been saved and transformed into something I could never have imagined when I was stuck in the hell of existence that was my own mind and body. Life can be lovely. Find the magic, find your soul. That really stuck with me. I absolutely love it for a few reasons. One, that it really resonated with me. I can really feel that time in the hell of existence. That was your own mind and body. I have felt similarly in the past, and I'm sure so many of my listeners also have felt that way or might even be feeling that way. Can you share a little bit about your journey? I mean, you've done so much and you do so much. So how did you get to where you are now? What bring us back to the beginning.
Okay, so I'm originally from Mayo, and I suppose mental health journey would have started very early. I was struggling from the age of about 7 or 8, diagnosed with an eating disorder at I think 11, and hospitalised with that, and hospitalised in and out for a couple of years, at which stage I kind of discovered alcohol and narcotics, and that kind of gave me some sort of respite almost from the eating disorder. So as you can imagine, it set me up for not ideal conditions, and I kind of existed on rock bottom-ish for a long time. Was very successful in some areas of my life. I worked in supply chain, but also was struggling an awful lot personally. And I would have, I suppose, started seeing, I suppose, mental health services around my mid to late 20s, and that was kind of a turning point for me. So at the time I was also made redundant. It would have been after I suppose, as I said, I thought I was existing on rock bottom, but it had got a lot worse, and I was very
lucky. A bit about that first of all before you move on.
No problem.
How did that when you were drinking, and those coping mechanisms, which I want to get into a little bit later on in the podcast, because a lot of us experience that and can really relate to using stuff outside of ourselves as coping mechanisms. How were you feeling at that time? Like, how did you actually feel when you felt like shit? What was it like on a day-to-day basis?
On a day-to-day, I suppose I kind of built up a bit of a balance between the eating disorder, which was still very prevalent, and the alcohol. So as I said, the alcohol almost gave me escapism, gave me the capacity to eat foods that I would normally never look at. I mean, my life was very restrictive. I would have been exercising obsessively. I would have, as I said, been very, very restrictive with food, going days at a time without eating, and then binging on alcohol and high calorie foods at the weekend. And I suppose, to be fair, I didn't realize, or I wasn't aware that there was anything different. I suppose because my mental health kind of deteriorated so early in my life, it was almost all I had known. And I would have had a lot of issues with I suppose, suicidal ideation, self-harm. Like I was terminally unhappy, but just not aware I was. It was just that was just how I existed. With the alcohol side of things, I mean, I heard it described at one stage. You know, you're kind of lying in bed, and it's like as if your mind is like a gremlin in a blender. Like you're just, you know, there's no peace. You get nothing from it. Those few moments of respite and that with the first drink or the second drink are grand. But I was never kind of a social drinker anyway. I would have always drank very unhealthily, even from the age of 15 or 16. I mean, I would have used it very much as a pain coping mechanism. And yeah, I knew, like, I was a problematic drinker from the get-go.
Yeah, same. I'm not sure that I ever drank. I don't drink alcohol anymore either. I'm not sure that I ever didn't drink to get drunk. Like, I always drank to get drunk, always drank to just the point where you just can't physically have another drink. Tell me.
Oh yeah,
you go ahead.
I'd be blacking out, you know, and like I would sometimes self-harm as well when I'd be drunk. Like it was like as if it gave me a space. I loved drinking by myself. I'd prefer that over drinking in company, and it just gave me a space to be miserable, and you know, kind of listen to sad songs, and you know, kind of basically create my own little depressive vault almost, and I would have been very restrictive in so many areas of my life, but also I would have pushed myself quite hard in other areas. So there was a lot of I suppose paradoxes there. There was a lot of conflict internally, and I suppose that's where I have found parts work so helpful, both for myself and also in the work that I do with others, because you know, you can have one part of you that desperately wants a nice life and to feel well and to feel nourished and healthy, and another side of you that basically wants nothing to do with that, and just being able to almost step out of that conflict and realize that both of those parts are doing their best to protect you.
Wow, I'm so excited to get into that part of what you've discussed. However, I don't want to do it just yet. I want to continue. Like, I'm really excited to talk about all the ways in which we can heal, because I know a big part of your teachings is all about healing. However, I want to stick with the dark stuff just for a few more minutes. You mentioned in your work that trauma isn't the experience, but the response to the experience. And I found that so interesting, and that a traumatized body is a harsh environment to live in. Both of those statements I could really, really resonate with. And I think so many people can too. Like, there's so many people walking around having experienced trauma, not feeling safe in their bodies, but not even knowing that that they don't feel safe. So they end up almost stuck in this horrible stress, fright mode, freeze mode, which then makes them make unhealthy choices that they don't want to make, which you've kind of touched on there, and I want to get back to later. But first of all, trauma. How do you know that you've experienced, like, I don't mean how do you know you've experienced trauma, but like, let's say you're in a really dark place, you're working really hard, you're drinking too much, you're eating too much, you want to be healthy, you don't know why you can't get there. How can somebody join the dots to that?
Well, I suppose I always see the drinking, or you know, the food issues, drug taking, whatever it is kind of I suppose it's more of a symptom as opposed to a problem. And it's usually an indication that you're trying to not feel something. And so underneath the behavior, you know, there's the question, what is it that I'm not, or that I'm unwilling to feel? And particularly when you're living in a very dysregulated body, life can feel very unsafe, the world can feel very unsafe, and you're always looking for soothing or regulation. But I suppose, like, to answer your question,
isn't it though? It's so interesting. I mean, I did that for years. I did that for 20 years, just soothed outside of myself. And like you said, it's only when I took a step back and realized that was what that was I able to start healing. And I just, like, so many people just don't know. They just think, oh, I'm so shit at healthy eating. Oh, I just can't seem to stay on track. And as you said, it's not that at all. That's just a symptom of the underlying problem, isn't it? Like,
yeah, absolutely. And again, like, I suppose the way that our psyche works is actually genius, you know, because I mean, at some stage, I suppose trauma is when your system is too overwhelmed to cope with what's going on. And so basically, it almost goes into a type of response, and it develops something that will take you through that scenario, whether it be ongoing trauma in childhood, whether it be a once-off incident. But usually with a once-off incident, things are a lot more straightforward. You have what's referred to as complex PTSD, and that's like early and often. So, you know, they're little... not that I'd refer to them as little, but I suppose they're ongoing incidents are, you know, cases of neglect, or it doesn't even have to be a neglectful or an abusive environment. It can be just a misattunement, or it can be just that a child doesn't feel supported or nurtured or for whatever reason.
You mentioned a bit as well, like just living in maybe a very unemotionally
unstable. Yeah.
Unstable,
and an emotionally
household.
Dysregulated household.
Yeah. Wow.
Are dysfunctional in any way. And, you know, and like it's not just the household. I mean, it could be what's going on in the world at the time. Like, there's so many facets to it. And I suppose sometimes it can be helpful to identify, you know, kind of all of the trajectory. But it's, I suppose, more helpful to identify, okay, what is the feeling that I think I can't handle, or what is the wound in me that I don't want to access and that I am protecting myself from using alcohol or food or whatever it is.
So where do coping mechanisms come in? Like, is that from the mind or the body? Like, is the body just looking for ways to escape? Like, it seems like such a natural thing to do, to turn outside, to cope. Like, how does that all happen?
Yeah, well, I suppose it happens gradually sometimes, but once the mind and the nervous system detects, I suppose, overwhelm, it goes into protective mode, and I suppose you can come at it from two paradigms. You can come at it from the very, I suppose, kind of looking at it from a neurological nervous system perspective, where you see that, you know, that's where your fight, flight, freeze, fawn comes in. And that basically you move into an elevated state, a stress response. Or you can alternatively move into a state where you're dissociated and completely detached. And like, I suppose when you're using parts work, what you're doing is you're kind of nearly giving a name or a persona to the system, the nervous system, and the methods that we use to protect that system. And so that's where, you know, you kind of start looking at, okay, so what do I do when I'm feeling very anxious or very stressed or very disconnected or very alone or scared? And then be able to work your way back.
That's so interesting. And it's so interesting that it's always a feeling that we don't want to sit with.
Yeah, it's mind and body. I mean, you can't really separate it out, you know, because everything is working in conjunction with each other. I mean, like, it's I suppose when we have a body that is dysregulated, or a traumatized body, the mind will find, I suppose, it will synchronize with that, and it'll find things to be anxious about, or reasons to drink, or, you know, it'll create things. It's marvelous at doing that, and I suppose a person becomes Yeah. I mean, your brain will always find reasons to do what it is that you want to do, and it's kind of being very aware of the stories as well that go with that. Kind of some of the things that you're telling yourself. You might, right, I'm not drinking today, but oh, sure, look, it's Monday, and I'll start tomorrow, and technically it's somebody's birthday, so yada yada. And you can like so much energy goes into those internal conflicts,
And why?
which make it.
Yeah, I'm so interested in this. I'm nodding along like this because I can relate to every single thing you're saying. That feeling when you wake up in the morning and all you want to do is be healthy, but then by nighttime, your mind's telling you so clearly and definitively that yes, you need to eat loads on shit on the eat loads of shit while you're sitting on the couch or drink that wine. What is that? Is that like your stress response just getting really loud?
Yes, and it's getting really loud because it feels threatened. I suppose the thing is, a lot of these coping mechanisms, whether it's, as I said, self-harm, food, whatever, they have done the job that they were intended to do for quite a substantial amount of time. Otherwise, you wouldn't be, I suppose, registering this as a problem. And consequently, your system trusts them more than it would trust something alien. And something new or something different. So your protective parts kind of rebel against any changes that you're trying to implement. And I suppose then what happens is you kind of feel that shame of failure. Oh, I can't do this. I've done the same thing again. And consequently, your protective parts they're almost it's confirming things for them. They're just like, there you go, you try and change things and now you feel like this. And so it validates almost staying with whatever the behavior is that you're trying to change.
Yes.
And it's looking at those conflicts, but also realizing that neither of those voices are really you. They're just two parts like that are kind of having this argument about whose way is best. But again, you can step back from that. You can almost I don't know if you like running or anything like that, and you can see the voices, and you can almost observe kind of the little conversation in your head where you're like, oh yeah, I really want to do this, but da 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 da, and you can actually witness it happening in your own mind, and to be able to witness it means that you're able to separate from it a little bit, and that's what can be very helpful, because you can actually come in almost as a parental figure, or come in as kind of a managerial figure that is able to help mediate whilst not invalidating or not activating any of those parts, or making them feel threatened.
Oh, Fiona, that's so helpful. That's just so helpful. I know every single one of my listeners is going to find that so helpful. Thanks so much. And it actually brings me on to the next thing that I wanted to chat to you about, and you're chatting about now, something that changed my life: awareness. And I have so many things written down here that you have written, a lot of them on your Instagram, that I love so much. The ability to compassionately observe and decipher your thoughts and emotions while also understanding that they are possibly inaccurate is a skill that enhances every aspect of life. Can you talk to us about that? And you've been talking about it just now, that awareness bit. You are chatting to somebody, and like you said, they have that conflicting parts of them, both parts of them trying to keep them safe. How do they go from being in it to taking that step back and realizing that they are not their thoughts, that they're the awareness behind their thoughts? What would you say is the first step?
Well, I suppose it's a lifelong practice. I mean, oftentimes we assume that we need to perfect this, first of all, and it's being very compassionate with yourself in trying to learn how to separate yourself from your thoughts, because I mean, ultimately, you're pitting yourself up against yourself if you're trying to win this battle. But one of the methods I find very helpful is meditation. Now, some people eye roll when they hear that. Other people like, oh, I tried it and I'm just no good at it. And I think there's a lot of misconceptions in the Western world about what meditation actually has to involve. I mean, it's basically just the process of paying attention to your thoughts. And I mean, no matter, well, I don't know, maybe Zen monks have it down, but I don't anyway. And I've been I've been trying a long time. But it's basically learning to notice when your mind has become untethered and it's gone off on its own little kind of its own little path. And just being able to bring it back, I suppose, as efficiently as you can manage. And it's just about getting a little bit quicker at that, because ultimately, you know, we all have a voice that's very critical. We have a voice that's very judgmental of others. We have a voice that, you know, kind of is very resentful. Like, we have all of those things going on, and we don't necessarily separate ourselves from it. And yet we can do that. I mean, oftentimes, like, I would have an extremely harsh self-critic, and it would go into this, you know, I could make a very simple mistake, and basically it would go into this diatribe about like how awful a person I am. Now I'm using kind of the language that the language that I normally use in my head. I'm not going to repeat on here, but just, you know, kind of tearing myself apart.
Yeah.
And being able to see that happening and just be like, oh, Fiona, okay, you know, you made a mistake. It's not, you don't have to talk to yourself like that. You know, and no matter where your self-worth is, you can always kind of say that. You can always say, do you know what? As bad as I am, I don't deserve to be spoken to in those terms. So, and I always say to people with their practice, you know, you're going to sit down, and I mean, like the first few times, particularly if your nervous system is dysregulated, it's going to be very uncomfortable to try and sit and meditate for even a minute. I know there's a lot of apps out there that are very helpful, but again, sometimes there's an over focus on relaxation, whereas, as I said, meditation is an attentional practice. So it's about paying attention with intention, as opposed to relaxing and feeling wonderful afterwards. You know, so if you don't feel relaxed afterwards, well done. If you do, well done. You know, I mean, again, there's no failing at this. It's basically just pushing in a consistent practice. And I always say to clients, if you can do 1 minute a day, maybe 4 or 5 days a week, that's enough to get you started, to get you into the practice of doing it, because anything else is biting off too much, and you're going to end up just discarding it, because initially it is boring. It is, you know, kind of a little bit, I do always kind of find that I get quite jumpy. All of a sudden I think of like 100 to-do lists when I sit down to meditate, and it's about having the discipline to just sit there, notice the thoughts, notice when you've become distracted, bring yourself back, and do that again and again. And it's a lot more simple, I think, than people assume, but it's also it's not particularly enjoyable when you start out on the journey. And it's being realistic about your expectations.
Thanks for sharing that, because a lot of people attempt it and then say, oh, my mind wandered. But it's actually sitting in the struggle is the thing. And as you said,
your mind is going to wander. Yeah, exactly. And so that people understand that your mind wandering is the whole idea, because that allows you to bring it back. And every time you bring it back, it's the equivalent of a rep in the gym. You know, you're basically, and like sometimes you might get to, like I've got to the end of 25-minute meditations, and it's only at the very end I realized that the entire time I've been having a conversation with somebody who I'm never going to have the conversation with. But, you know, I've been in a rant with them the entire time. And I used to feel like as if, oh my God, I wasted, but it's not wasted. I mean, even if you only notice at the very end, then you've noticed. And it's about just building your strength at noticing when your mind is somewhere which isn't beneficial to you, or when the parts have kind of taken you off on a tangent.
That's amazing, because you can also bring that into, and back to the nighttime again, and sitting on that on the couch, because that's where a lot of the struggle is for many women. They're really busy, they've had great days, they've great intentions, busy days, not great days. They sit down on the couch. You can bring that in then, can't you? Like, stop, breathe, notice that your thoughts are telling you to go to the fridge, to go to the glass of wine, and connecting with that, and noticing that.
Yeah, but it's I suppose what I find particularly with women, and again, I'm stereotyping, but they're very hard on themselves, and they also put an awful lot of demand on themselves. I know we talk a lot about kind of, I suppose, the emotional labor of a household, but oftentimes the fridge or the wine is the only time that the mind stops thinking of all of the things to do, or all of the things that you didn't get done, or all of the problems that you have as an individual. I mean, our mind is constantly repeating things, and kind of, if I didn't keep mine in check, it should be like, oh, like, why did I eat that? Why did I do this? Da, da, da. It's just it's constantly harsh, and that's why a lot of people do end up reaching for something. So even just recognizing that you don't always have to follow the path that your mind is going in, and like, don't be so hard. Like, I feel like a lot of people are stuck in a cycle where they want the wine, they want the feeling that they associate with the wine. As soon as they have the wine, they hate themselves because they didn't intend to have the wine. And it's very cyclical and repetitive, as opposed to, like, there's nothing wrong with mindfully doing anything and just being like, okay, do you know what? I've had a rough, but also addressing why you're having something, as opposed to just doing it or not doing it, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does make sense, because it's back to that awareness thing again, and that entertaining the idea that your thoughts can be inaccurate or not facts, that they're just thoughts, that they're just thoughts.
Absolutely. And I suppose even with awareness, I mean, there's parts of our subconscious that our mind doesn't want us to be aware of. And that's part of the reason sometimes as well, people find it so difficult to understand why they do certain things. It's a part of themselves that's possibly too painful, that they have compartmentalized, that they're trying to avoid. So even though they're trying to deal with a lot of these things, I suppose, at a logical level, a lot of this stuff isn't necessarily logical. It's subconscious. It's something that a person may not have any awareness of. So I suppose having awareness is one thing, but also sometimes getting a bit of help to explore your inner world can be beneficial too.
Yeah, because that's why we're so hard on ourselves, isn't it? Like, the amount of times I hear people say, like, well, I know what to do, I just can't seem to do it. This brings me really on to loving yourself. And you mentioned you do not have to love yourself to treat yourself with basic human decency. For someone who has spent their entire life verbally abusing themselves with their self-talk, the concept of self-love can be too far a stretch. I loved that so much. Can we chat about loving yourself and how we start? Because the reason why, because, we rarely judge or dislike ourselves into living differently. That's what you said on your Instagram. We rarely judge or dislike ourselves into living differently. How fucking true is that? When I look back at all the years that I tried to get healthy, 20 years of attempting to get healthy and not doing it, it comes down to this, really, the telling myself I was an ugly, fat, horrible piece of shit. That's not gonna change, make you change your habits, but yet this is what we do. This is what we fucking do.
Yeah. Sorry, continues. I cut across you there.
Yeah, no, this is what we do. So, like, Jesus, where do we start with this? So first of all, I'm guessing we have to become aware of how we're speaking to ourselves to actually understand that we are actually being nasty people to ourselves.
Yes, and I suppose this is where sometimes understanding ourselves from the perspective of multiplicity, our parts, like, is beneficial, because rather than trying to almost vanquish a critical part, we can talk to it in a way that is a little kinder, because even the critic needs to be treated. We tend to be like, I suppose, quite cruel towards our critic, or tell it to shut up, tell it whatever. When we start trying to address this voice in our head, that like for a lot of people don't even realize that the critic is a part. They think it's just, I'm thinking these thoughts. This is what I believe. This is what I identify with. So even just separating slightly from it, but also being a little bit more curious with it. So why would you say that to yourself? And kind of, I always, whenever, like, it has definitely helped me being a mother, because I suppose I know the voice that I use with my child when I'm trying to soothe them, or when I'm trying to bring them comfort. And that's the inner voice I would use with myself when there's an attack going on, or when I'm giving myself a hard time about something. I try to come in with a very approachable, soothing voice, because again, a lot of these parts are very young. Like your internal critic could be, kind of 9 or 10 years old, and so you have to kind of treat it like that, and you have to talk to your inner world in a way that is very maternal. And so it's I suppose asking the critic, okay, how does it benefit us thinking these things? And even if we can't go as far as thinking, oh, I'm stunning, or I love my body, which, like, it's too big a stretch, as I said, for a lot of people. And it's also inconsistent, because your body changes, so will your view on your body. And it's about, okay, how can I just even say, okay, my body is doing what it's doing, and I respect it for that, and I'm going to try and nourish it and nurture it to the best of my ability. So it's respecting it, as opposed to lying to yourself and repeating mantras of oh, I love my body, or affirmations which really you don't believe. So just kind of speaking in terms of respect has been really beneficial to me, because I had to get to a point where I tried to do that first.
That's so powerful. Yeah, I do that. I speak very gently to myself. I have to kind of coax myself, especially if I've been triggered. I say, like, it's okay, Jessica. That's okay. Just walk into that room. It's all right. I can really relate to what you are saying there. If you are... Oh, actually, accountability. You mentioned accountability a good bit. Where does that bit come in? Awareness and accountability are non-judgmental practices. What do you mean by that?
Well, we tend to see things in a very dualistic way, and we have, it's either not my fault or it is my fault. And so either way, if it's someone else's fault, and either way, there's judgment, and there is I suppose a harshness about that, as opposed to recognizing that something cannot be your fault, but you still, like, for example, drinking. So not the reasons you drink may not be your fault, but the drinking behavior is your responsibility, and you are accountable for it. So it's and that's where the compassion piece comes in. So you can recognize, okay, the reason that I feel so miserable, or kind of like, it isn't my fault per se, but it's my responsibility to do something about it, and it's myself that I have to be accountable to. And I'm going to set up the standards for myself in a way that is understanding, is gentle, compassionate, lenient, but I'm also going to try to be a better version of myself. So there's the acceptance of, okay, I am where I am, and I'm not going to judge myself too much for that, but I can also do better at the same time.
I love that. And I've never thought of it like that before. Because, like, for example, like, people in my past, I can say this is the reason why I might have done these behaviors and still feel really angry, but I'm taking my power back and being responsible for my habits with my alcohol consumption.
Yeah,
I like that because
absolutely.
you're addressing the two things.
Yeah,
You're
and
still a fucking horrible fucker, but I'm taking responsibility. You might be the reason why I started all this shit in the first place, but I'm responsible for what I'm doing.
absolutely, yeah. So you're not invalidating anything from a person's past, and but again, when you're stuck in that kind of blame and when you're stuck in that cycle of unfairness, it's very hard to get out of it, and it
Yeah.
can be very addictive. Because I mean, ultimately, it allows you to keep doing what you think it is that you want to do. Because I mean, this part of me that's always going to want to get hammered, like, and and like, kind of having that understanding, that may not necessarily ever not be there, but again, it doesn't have any impact really on the people who have done the most damage to you. It impacts you. It's almost, like this whole thing of kind of drinking poison and expecting the other person to hurt.
Yeah.
Like, it's what you're doing is you're taking away your capacity for joy and for fulfillment and, for vibrancy. But that's not, like, I suppose none of this stuff is cut and dry. There's complexity to it. And I suppose, again, that's where the understanding and the acceptance piece comes in, because, you may feel that way one day, but the next day you may just be completely stuck in a cycle of the past. And just being a witness to all of that, being an observer of all of that, and kind of not coming down hard on yourself when you do get, I suppose, stuck, or when you do feel that, oh, I'm back in that bitterness, or I'm back in what, because again, the way out is a lot easier if you can be a little bit, I suppose, more compassionate and less judgmental.
Yeah, that's why I love movement so much, because I find it really helps me get out of the being stuck part, and it can be such an anchor. Like, everything else can be going really hard in the week, but the movement piece I find really gets you. I can't believe I said movement piece. Ugh, I hate that. Gets you out of your head and moving, and helps change your mood. What's your favorite thing to do that keeps you going? Your non-negotiable. What's your favorite non-negotiable habit, Fiona?
Oh, well, I'm actually in kind of a liminal space with that at the minute, because for a long time I would have said weights and running, that was my go-to. But my body is aging, and I'm just not. I'm not getting, like, I'm nearly at a stage where I'm finding. Yeah, a sense of apathy particularly with weightlifting and with running, probably because I can't do it as well as I used to, and there was a level of ego attached to all of that as well, but also it's the harshness of it sometimes can be, so I'm currently considering and weighing up different options for movement. Now, I used to love yoga, but might get back to that. But yeah, like, I've always, maybe dance, or, kind of, like, I suppose there's a lot of different facets that you can explore, and it's like, it's not always going to be the same thing. Sometimes just gentle walking is great as well. But any sort of movement is absolutely fantastic for self-regulation and for being able to kind of deal with your nervous system. But just to be aware as well that some of the more intense exercise is another stress on the body. So even though it feels great, you have to allow the body to recover fully from that, and it can be great to have multiple areas that you can utilize.
Yeah.
Because and it's only as I'm getting older, I'm like, oh shit, like, I'm not going to be able to run 10K every time I feel stressed. Not that I'm only 42, but I like the realization that, okay, I'm going to have other tools in my belt. is very much one I'm at the moment, and trying to kind of come up with stuff that isn't as high impact and high intensity, even though that would have been what I had a great grow for, I loved all of that good stuff.
Yeah, that's what we do in Thrive Academy. We lift weights. However, it's all very much based on going at your own pace. It's such a game changer, isn't it? And then, like you mentioned, also having that lovely self-awareness part of you that is able to say, you know what, I'm going to go for a gentle walk today, and I'm going to cocoon myself and be very gentle with myself, and maybe I'll allow myself to switch days and do my workout tomorrow, go at a pace that I love. I think that's so important. I think there's so many people out there being taught that one fits all, that they have to lift weights a certain way, that they have to follow the instructor a certain way, and that they have to push, when actually that's not it at all. It's listening to your body, going at a pace. Sometimes you might wake up feeling tired and overwhelmed, and you might go lovely and slow, and other times you just want to get a really good paced session in, and that's good too. And I think it's when people don't allow themselves that ebb and flow, they start to resent it. They hate it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, I suppose I would be quite an extreme person in multiple areas of my life. And I would have, like, as much as I would rely on exercise, I would have been like, I would have found it difficult to not exercise on a day, and I'm better at that now, at kind of taking a bit of rest. But yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's about kind of working with where you're at any given time. I think it's important for women as well to work with their menstrual cycle. Like, again, I still have a great enthusiasm for a weight session the first 2 weeks, and then, like, when you're coming closer to your period, like, all of a sudden just you're just not as strong. Your body isn't as capable of building anything, or, you need to just take better care of yourself. And you can use that to kind of gauge, okay, what kind of exercise will I be doing according to what resources I have, rather than pushing myself through something when it's not really catering to my body.
Yeah. So tell me this. If you were chatting to a woman now over 40, and she was really busy, very busy career woman, stressed out, and she was in the place where she was really trying to be healthy and her intentions were there, but she was just not getting there. She's missing workouts, she's eating shit on the couch at night, she's binge eating at the weekend, or not even binge eating, just eating unintentionally. Where would you say is the very first place you would start? Or if you could go back even to your younger self and say, like, where would be the first place you would start before you reached out to anybody else? What would you consider? I love this question because it makes me think about it as well. I'm like, God, if I had only one wish for somebody. Actually, do you know what mine is? I'll tell you mine first while you're thinking of yours. I think mine would be to understand, first of all, that you aren't your thoughts. That changed the game for me. When I understood that I am not my thoughts, that I am the awareness behind my thoughts, I was able to listen to my thoughts rather than be my thoughts and act out my thoughts. Kind of like, not act out my thoughts, but I mean that in the sense of, like, you are a piece of shit, you are a failure, and then not even hearing that, just living that, as opposed to now I hear my thoughts and go, oh wow, God, that's inaccurate, that's not true. So that's where I would start, becoming aware that you're not your thoughts. What about you? Have I taken yours?
No, I mean, I suppose a lot of the time, what I find very beneficial is for somebody to just see the pain that you're in and the suffering that you're experiencing, because a lot of the time people are stuck in a cycle of suffering, and just to have somebody witness that and say, I see you and I see how hard you're trying, and I'm so sorry that this is where you're at the moment, and I'd really love to just listen to you and see if we can do anything to make things a little bit easier, and just, again, for some people, that is just huge, because I suppose they've never even allowed anyone to see how much they're suffering internally. I mean, so many people are going through the world and they're just tearing themselves apart on a daily basis. And I know exactly what that's like, you know, and so sometimes even just something like that, so that a person feels understood, that they feel seen, that, you know, they feel like as if somebody actually gives a shit, somebody cares, that can go a long way. That can go a long way. And then I suppose you start getting into the more gritty stuff. Like, I suppose I would use certain approaches, depending, it's very much individualistic. It depends on the client. Different clients need different things. So there is no, I suppose, panacea kind of method that I would use. I would meet the client where they're at.
And if somebody was afraid to talk to somebody, like even before that step, would you recommend just sitting down with your partner or your journal and just saying straight, I feel like shit, this isn't working for me?
Yeah, and I suppose it's looking at, sometimes it can be helpful as well to look at what you want your life to look like, you know, and where is it at now, and what's standing in your way.
Love that. Know where you are, know where you want to go, and then know all the barriers that are in front of you that you need to conquer, and not giving up until you get there. Wow.
Yeah, but I suppose the thing, like, yeah, it's again, being very, very, very forgiving with ourselves, you know, because if you start off from a place of acceptance and kindness, it makes things a lot easier. You know, you're encouraging yourself, as opposed to humiliating yourself every time there's a setback or a failure. So it's having a better relationship with the parts of yourself that you don't like.
Love that so much. Tell us about what you do and how you bring all the different parts into your practice.
I suppose as personally, or in my work?
Your practice. And I'm going to have all of your Instagram handle and your website on the show notes. But tell us, like, what you do, how you bring the different elements of what you do into your practice on a daily basis, like how you work with your clients.
Yeah, I suppose it depends what I'm working with. I suppose my job as a psychotherapist is very varied. You never know what the next person is coming in with, which I absolutely love. And what I would do is, I suppose, usually the first session, I just I allow the client to just talk about whatever it is that they need to talk about. One of, I suppose, the skills that I would have is I'm very good at connecting the dots with regards to a person's life. I think because I started in therapy so early, maybe it's just what I've always known, and it's just, I would assess as the person goes along what I feel they need. Also what they're saying that they need, and then we would discuss at the end, okay, objectives and how we're going to go forward. And I would use, like, I'm multidisciplinary, so I would use, I wouldn't always use parts, for example, in dealing with some clients, because they're not comfortable with it, and you pick up on that straight away. So again, you're working with their specific needs and the language that resonates with them, and, you know, kind of what it is that they need from the session. So it's my job to ascertain, okay, what does this person need from me, and how can I provide that? So as I said, yeah, it's hard to kind of to give it a formula, because unfortunately I don't really have one, but I think that's the beauty of this work anyway, you know. Yeah. It's different for everybody.
I love that so much. Where can people find you? Where's the best place?
Well, I am in Maynooth in County Kildare, so I have my own practice there. I also do online work, and my email is FionaFeeley1@hotmail.com. My website is www.fundamentals.ie.
Fantastic. Fiona, it has been an absolute pleasure having you on the podcast. Thank you so much for taking the time out. I know this is going to be so helpful to all our listeners. Thank you very much.
Hey, thank you so much for inviting me on. I really enjoyed it.
All my love.
Take
Bye.
care.